The wind howled across the frozen tundra, carrying whispers of ancient stories and the sharp bite of winter. In the vast, snow-draped expanse of Nunavut, where the horizon stretched endlessly under a sky painted with the ghostly dance of the aurora borealis, Reza Hosseini found himself far from the sunlit bazaars of Isfahan. At 49, the Iranian calligrapher had traded the bustling streets of his homeland for a place so remote it felt like the edge of the world. His hands, once accustomed to the delicate curves of Persian script on vellum, now traced poetry into the icy walls of igloos, blending the elegance of his heritage with the stark beauty of the Arctic. Reza had been a wanderer all his life, driven by a restless passion for art and discovery. In Iran, he was known for his mastery of Nastaliq, the flowing script that turned words into liquid art. But it was a photographan image of an Inuit woman carving bone under the northern lights that had sparked a longing in him. He dreamed of capturing the raw, untouched beauty of the Arctic through his calligraphy, merging two worlds that seemed impossibly distant. With a suitcase full of inks, brushes, and a heart full of ambition, he boarded a plane to Inuit, unsure of what awaited, but certain it was where he needed to be. The journey was grueling. Flights gave way to snowmobiles, and snowmobiles to dog sleds, as Reza traversed the frozen landscape to reach a small Inuit community nestled along the shores of a frozen bay. The cold was unlike anything he'd known, sharp, unrelenting, seeping into his bones despite the layers of borrowed furs. His first glimpse of the village was a cluster of igloos glowing faintly under the moonlight, their domed silhouettes both alien and inviting. The air smelled of salt and frost, and the silence was so profound it felt sacred. Reza's arrival stirred curiosity. The villagers, bundled in parkas and sealskin boots, eyed the stranger with a mix of wariness and intrigue. His dark eyes and weathered hands, stained with years of ink, marked him as an outsider, yet his quiet demeanor and the sketches he carried swirling letters dancing across paper piqued their interest. It was Ayla, a woman with a sharp wit and a laugh that echoed like a bell, who first approached him. She was 8 months pregnant, her parka stretched taut over her belly, and her eyes held the warmth of someone who had seen both hardship and joy. "You're the one who writes in the air?" she asked, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Reza smiled, unsure she was teasing. "I write on paper, walls, maybe even snow," he replied, pulling out a sketchbook to show her a verse of Rumi he'd penned in flowing black ink. Ayla traced the unfamiliar script with a gloved finger, her face softening. "It looks like the wind," she said, "like it could move." That moment, simple yet profound, was the beginning of Reza's integration into the community. Life in the village was a rhythm of survival and tradition. Reza learned to navigate the ice, to fish through holes in the frozen sea, and to listen to the stories told by firelight. The Inuit women, 5 in total, all pregnant, all bound by a fierce sisterhood, became his guides. There was Ayla, the storyteller, Nuna, the quiet healer with a gift for carving, Sila, whose laughter could melt the coldest night, Kala, who wove intricate patterns into mittens, and Puti, whose songs carried the weight of generations. Each woman, in her own way, welcomed Reza into their world, teaching him the language of the land Inuktitut, words that rolled like pebbles in a stream. The language barrier was a challenge at first. Reza's halting English and non-existent Inuktitut made conversations a dance of gestures and guesses. But art became their bridge. One evening, as the women gathered to sew and share stories, Reza offered to decorate an igloo with his calligraphy. He chose a verse from Hafez, one that spoke of love transcending borders. "The heart is a mirror. It reflects the light of all it sees." With a sharpened bone tool, he etched the words into the packed snow, the Persian script curling like vines against the ice. The women watched, mesmerized as the foreign letters took shape, glowing under the aurora's light. "It's beautiful," Nuna whispered, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "What does it say?" Reza translated, his voice steady despite the cold. The women nodded, their faces lit with understanding. Sela clapped her hands, declaring, "We need more. Write our stories next." And so began a collaboration that would change them all. Reza spent weeks learning the women's stories, their voices weaving tales of ancestors, spirits, and a land. He translated their oral histories into calligraphy, blending Persian poetry with Inuit lore. On one igloo, he inscribed Ayla's tale of a great whale that saved her grandfather from a storm, the script curling like waves. On another, he wrote Kala's story of a star that guided her mother home, the letters shimmering like constellations. The igloos became a gallery of poetry, each one a testament to the women's resilience and the calligrapher's reverence for their culture. Living among them, Reza found himself changing. In Iran, his art had been solitary, a dialogue between him and the page. Here, it was communal, a shared act of creation. He marveled at the women's strength, their ability to thrive in a land that demanded so much. They taught him to see beauty in the starkness of snow, the fleeting warmth of a shared meal, the quiet pride of a community that endured. In return, he offered his skill, his stories of Persian poets, and a perspective that made the women see their own traditions anew. As winter deepened, so did their bond. Reza became a brother to the women, a confidant who listened without judgment. They teased him about his thin beard, his clumsy attempts at ice fishing, but they also trusted him. When Puti sang a lullaby for her unborn child, Reza wrote the words in Inuktitut, his first attempt at the syllabic script, and carved them into the snow. Puti's eyes glistened as she traced the letters, her voice soft. "You've made my song last forever." But integration wasn't without its tensions. Some elders questioned Reza's presence, wary of an outsider altering their traditions. "Why do we need his words?" one grumbled during a community meeting. "Our stories are enough." Reza listened, his heart heavy, but Ayla spoke up. "His words don't replace ours. They add to them, like the aurora adds to the sky." Her defense, fierce and unyielding, shifted the room. Slowly, the elders began to see Reza not as a stranger, but as a bridge, someone who honored their ways while sharing his own. The women's pregnancies brought a new layer to their connection. Reza, who had never married, found himself drawn into their anticipation, their fears, and their hopes. He learned the rituals of Inuit motherhood songs sung to unborn babies, amulets carved for protection. In return, he shared Persian tales of love and rebirth, stories of Scheherazade and the Phoenix. One night, as they sat around a seal oil lamp, Sela asked, "Do you think our children will know your poetry?" Reza paused, then smiled. "I hope they'll know both yours and mine." His own transformation was undeniable. In Iran, Reza had been restless, haunted by a sense of displacement. Here, he found purpose. The Arctic, with its relentless beauty and unforgiving demands, stripped away his pretensions. He began to see his calligraphy not as an end, but as a means, a way to connect, to heal, to honor. The women, too, were changed. Nuna, who had always been reserved, began writing her own poems, inspired by Reza's art. Kala wove Persian motifs into her textiles, blending snowflakes with paisley swirls. Their worlds were merging, creating something new yet rooted in both. Reza's greatest contribution came unexpectedly. The village faced a challenge. Their small school lacked resources, and the children's education suffered. Reza, drawing on his years of teaching calligraphy in Iran, proposed a project. He would teach the children to write, blending Inuktitut syllabics with Persian script, creating a bilingual art form. The women rallied behind him, convincing the elders to fund the project with community resources. Reza spent hours with the children, guiding their hands as they traced letters in the snow, then on paper. The school became a hub of creativity, with igloos outside adorned with the children's work poems of seals and stars, written in 2 scripts, 2 languages. The community began to change. The children's pride in their dual heritage sparked a renewed interest in education. Parents, inspired by their kids, joined evening classes to learn calligraphy. The igloos, once temporary shelters, became symbols of cultural fusion, drawing visitors from nearby villages. Word spread, and soon, a documentary crew arrived to capture the story of the Iranian calligrapher and the Inuit women whose lives had intertwined. The film, titled Ink on Ice, showcased the igloo's poetry, the women's strength, and Reza's quiet devotion. It premiered at a festival in Toronto, earning accolades and spreading their story worldwide. Reza never intended to stay forever, but the Arctic had claimed him. He built a small home in the village, its walls lined with sketches of Persian and Inuit art. The 5 women, now mothers, named their children with names that echoed both cultures: Amir, Nunik, Soraya, Kila, and Reza. The calligrapher became a father figure, teaching the children to write, to dream, to see the world as a tapestry of stories. His own story, once one of wandering, had found its anchor in the north. Years later, as Reza stood with the women and their children before an igloo glowing with poetry under the aurora, he felt a completeness he'd never known. The wind carried their laughter, the snow held their words, and the sky bore witness to a bond that transcended borders. Their story, etched in ice and ink, became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the coldest corners of the world, human connection could create something eternal. The Arctic winter tightened its grip, the days shrinking to mere slivers of twilight, but the village pulsed with a warmth that defied the cold. Reza Hosseini, the Iranian calligrapher who had arrived with dreams of blending his art with the north, had become more than a visitor. The igloos, adorned with his flowing Persian script intertwined with Inuit stories, stood as monuments to a union no one had foreseen. The 5 women, Ayla, Nuna, Sila, Kala, and Puta, had welcomed him into their lives, their pregnancies a shared journey that mirrored Reza's own transformation. Now, as spring loomed on the horizon, promising longer days and softer winds, their bond faced new tests and triumphs. The school project had become the heart of the village. Reza's classes, where children learned to weave Inuktitut syllabics with Persian calligraphy, were more than lessons in writing. They were a celebration of identity. The children, ranging from wide-eyed 6-year-olds to skeptical teenagers, gathered daily in the community hall, a low building warmed by a stove and lined with caribou hides. Reza, with his gentle patience, guided their hands, teaching them to hold brushes with care, to let the ink flow like water. Writing is like breathing, he told them, his accent softening with time. It's how you tell the world you're here. Ayla's son, Kila, was among the brightest. At 8, he had his mother's sharp wit and a knack for mimicking Reza's flourishes. One afternoon, as snow fell in soft curtains outside, Kila presented Reza with a sheet of paper. On it, in wobbly but determined strokes, was a poem in Inuktitut, the syllabics curling like waves, paired with a Persian translation Reza had taught him. It's about the seal who dances with the moon, Kila said, his cheeks flushed with pride. Reza's eyes stung as he read the words, not just for their beauty, but for what they represent. A child claiming both his heritage and a new art form. He pinned the poem to the wall, where it joined dozens of others, a tapestry of young voices. But not all in the village embraced the changes. A group of younger men, led by a hunter named Taktu, questioned Reza's influence. Taktu was respected, his skill with a harpoon unmatched, but his distrust of outsiders ran deep. "We've survived without fancy writing," he said one evening at a community feast, his voice cutting through the chatter. "What's wrong with our ways?" The room grew quiet, the crackle of the fire loud in the silence. Reza, seated beside Ayla, felt the weight of every eye on him. He opened his mouth to respond, but Nuna, the quiet healer, spoke first. "Reza doesn't take our ways," she said, her voice steady despite her usual reserve. "He adds to them. My daughter, Nunik, will grow up knowing her stories can live on paper, on snow, in ways the world can see. That's not lost its strength." Her words, simple yet fierce, shifted the mood. Takta's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. Later, as Reza helped clear the dishes, Nuna squeezed his arm. "Don't mind him," she whispered. "He's afraid of change, but he'll come around." Change, Reza learned, was both a gift and a challenge in the Arctic. The women, now mothers, juggled their newborns with the demands of village life. Sela's laughter still rang out, but it was softer now, tempered by sleepless nights with her son, Amir. Kala, whose textiles had begun incorporating Persian motifs, worked late into the night, her fingers deft despite the weight of caring for Soraya. Pudi's songs, once carefree, now carried a tenderness as she sang to her daughter, Reza, named in honor of the calligrapher. Ayla and Nuna, too, balanced motherhood with their roles as storytellers and healers, their strength a quiet force that held the community together. Reza found himself drawn into their world in ways he hadn't expected. He wasn't just a teacher or an artist anymore, was family. When Amir caught a fever, Reza sat with Sela through the night, brewing tea from herbs Nuna recommended. When Kala struggled to finish a commission weaving, Reza stayed up with her, sketching designs to spark her creativity. He learned the rhythm of their lives, the way they leaned on each other, and he began to see his own role not as an outsider, but as a thread in their tapestry. One spring evening, as the sun lingered longer in the sky, the women proposed a new project, a festival to celebrate the igloos' poetry. "We'll show the world what we've made together," Ayla said, her eyes bright with the idea. The festival would feature the children's calligraphy, the women's crafts, and Reza's art, a fusion of cultures under the Arctic sky. The community rallied, with even Taktu reluctantly agreeing to help build a stage from packed snow. Reza worked tirelessly, carving new verses into the igloo spoons that blended Rumi's mysticism with Inuit tales of the sea goddess Sedna. The festival drew visitors from across Nunavut, their snowmobiles dotting the horizon like stars. The igloos, illuminated by lanterns, glowed with calligraphy, each one telling a story of resilience and connection. The children performed, reciting their poems in Inuktitut and Persian, their voices rising above the wind. Kala's textiles, vibrant with snowflakes and paisley, hung like banners, while Pudi's songs wove through the air, accompanied by the soft drum beats of the elders. Reza, standing at the edge of the crowd, felt a lump in his throat. This was more than art, it was a legacy. The documentary crew returned, capturing the festival's vibrancy for a follow-up to Ink on Ice. They interviewed the women, who spoke of Reza not as an outsider, but as a brother. "He saw us," Sela said, cradling Amir. "Not just our land, but our hearts." The crew also filmed Reza, who struggled to find words for what the village meant to him. "I came to write," he said finally, "but I stayed to learn." The festival wasn't without its challenges. A sudden storm threatened to bury the stage, and Reza joined the men in shoveling snow, his hands blistered but his resolve unshaken. Taktu, working beside him, muttered, "You're not bad for a city man." It was the closest he'd come to approval, and Reza grinned, sensing a crack in the hunter's armor. By the festival's end, Taktu offered Reza a carved bone pendant, a gesture of respect that spoke louder than words. As summer approached, the village faced a new challenge. Funding for the school was dwindling. The government grants that had sustained it were cut, threatening the calligraphy program. Reza, determined to help, reached out to contacts in Iran, pitching a fundraising campaign to sell prints of the children's art. The response was overwhelming. Galleries in Tehran and Toronto expressed interest, and donations poured in from viewers of Ink on Ice. The school not only survived, but expanded, adding a small library where Reza's books on Persian poetry sat beside Inuit oral histories. The women, too, found ways to contribute. Ayla began recording her stories, creating a podcast that reached listeners across Canada. Nuna, inspired by Reza's teaching, trained as a literacy tutor, helping adults learn to read and write. Kala's textiles became a small business. Her designs sold online to buyers as far as Dubai. Sela and Pudi collaborated on a children's book, blending their songs and stories with Reza's illustrations. The village, once isolated, was now connected to the world, its identity intact but enriched by new possibilities. Reza's own art evolved. He began experimenting with ice as a medium, freezing ink into translucent blocks that caught the light like stained glass. His new pieces, displayed at the school, were meditations on belonging, Persian letters melting into Inuit syllabics, their forms fluid yet eternal. He sent one to a gallery in Isfahan, where it was hailed as a masterpiece, but for Reza, its true value lay in the children's awe as they watched him work. One summer night, under a sky that never fully darkened, the women and their children gathered with Reza by the bay. The igloos had melted, but their stories lived on in photographs and memories. Ayla, holding Keela's hand, turned to Reza. "You're one of us now," she said. "You've given us more than words." Reza looked at the faces around him, Nuna with Nunik, Sila with Amir, Kala with Soraya, Puti with Reza, and Ayla with Killen, felt a warmth that no Arctic winter could touch. The documentary, released globally, spread their story further. Schools in Canada adopted the calligraphy program, and artists from Greenland and Alaska visited to learn from Reza. The village became a beacon, proof that cultures could meet without losing themselves. Reza, now 50, no longer dreamed of wandering. He had found his place, not just in the Arctic, but in the hearts of those who called him family. As they stood together, the aurora flickering above, Reza carved a final verse into the snow. "In the heart's ink, we write home." It was for the women, the children, and the land that had claimed him. The words would melt with the spring, but their meaning would endure, a testament to a journey that began with a stranger's dream and ended with a community's love. The Arctic summer, with its endless daylight, bathed the village in a golden glow, transforming the tundra into a canvas of wildflowers and shimmering ice. Reza Hosseini, now a fixture in the Inuit community, felt the rhythm of the North in his bones. His calligraphy, once confined to paper in the bustling markets of Isfahan, had found a new home in the snow and stories of Nunavut. The 5 women, Ella, Nuna, Sila, Kala, and Push, along with their children, had become his family, their lives intertwined like the scripts he carved into the ice. As the seasons turned, their shared journey faced its final challenges and crystallized into a legacy that would echo far beyond the Arctic. The success of the festival and the documentary Ink on Ice had brought attention to the village, but with it came new pressures. Outsiders, artists, journalists, and curious travelers began arriving, drawn by the story of the Iranian calligrapher and the Inuit women whose igloos bore poetry. The village, once a quiet refuge, buzzed with visitors, their snowmobiles and cameras disrupting the stillness. While some, like the children, delighted in the attention, others, including Taktu and the elders, grew wary. "They come to look, not to understand," Taktu grumbled one evening, sharpening his harpoon. "What happens when they take more than they give?" Reza felt the weight of his role. He had never meant to turn the village into a spectacle, but his art, now inseparable from the community's identity, had drawn the world's gaze. He gathered the women to discuss the future. "We need to protect what we've built," he said, his voice steady but laced with concern. Ayla, ever the strategist, proposed a solution, a cultural center where visitors could learn without intruding. "We'll share our stories on our terms," she said, her eyes fierce. "Your art, our voices together, will show them who we are." The idea took root. Reza, the women, and the community began planning the center, a space that would house the calligraphy school, Kala's textile workshop, and a gallery for the children's art. Funding came from the documentary's proceeds and the sale of prints, but the real work was communal. Taktu, softening toward Reza, led a team to gather materials, driftwood, stone, and hides, while Nuna organized healing workshops to teach visitors about Inuit medicine. Sila and Puti composed a song cycle for the center's opening, blending their lullabies with Persian melodies Reza had taught them. Kala wove a massive tapestry for the entrance, its threads a dance of snowflakes and paisley, symbolizing the fusion of their worlds. Construction was slow, hampered by the Arctic's harsh conditions. A late summer storm buried the site in snow, forcing Reza and the men to dig for days. His hands, once soft from years of wielding brushes, were now calloused, his fingers scarred from the cold. Yet he worked alongside Taktu, their shared labor forging a quiet respect. One evening, as they rested by a fire, Taktu handed Reza a cup of tea. "You're stubborn," he said, a rare smile breaking through. "Like us." Reza laughed, the sound mingling with the crackle of flames. It was a small victory, but it meant everything. The children, now older, were the heart of the project. Kila, Ayla's son, took charge of designing the center's sign, his Inuktitut syllabics paired with Reza's Persian script. Nunik, Nuna's daughter, painted murals of seals and stars, her shy demeanor giving way to confidence. Amir, Sila's son, organized the younger kids to write poems for the opening, while Soraya, Kala's daughter, helped her mother sew curtains. Little Reza, Puti's daughter, toddled behind her namesake, mimicking his brushstrokes with a stick in the snow. Watching them, Reza felt a pang of pride mixed with humility. These children, born of the women who had welcomed him, were carrying his art into the future. But the center's creation wasn't without conflict. Some elders worried it would dilute their traditions, turning their culture into a display for outsiders. At a community meeting, an elder named Inuit stood, his voice trembling with age but firm with conviction. "Our stories are for us, not for sale," he said. Reza listened, his heart heavy. He had faced this criticism before, but it stung anew. Before he could respond, Puti rose, her daughter on her hip. "Reza's words don't take our stories," she said. "They make them stronger. My Reza will grow up knowing her songs can live in ink, in snow, in the world's ears. That's not lost its life." Her words, echoed by the other women, swayed the room. The elders agreed to support the center, provided it remained a place of learning, not profit. Reza, moved by Puti's defense, redoubled his efforts. He spent nights sketching designs, ensuring every detail honored the community's values. The center, when finished, was modest but beautiful, a low building of stone and wood, its walls lined with calligraphy and textiles, its roof open to the sky for storytelling under the aurora. The opening was a celebration unlike any the village had seen. Visitors from across Nunavut and beyond gathered, their faces lit by lanterns as the children performed. Kila recited his poem about the dancing seal, his voice clear and strong. Nunik unveiled her mural, earning gasps from the crowd. Sila and Puti's song cycle, accompanied by drums and Reza's soft chanting of Rumi, brought tears to many eyes. Kala's tapestry, hung above the entrance, shimmered in the twilight, a testament to the village's resilience. Reza, standing with the women, felt the weight of their journey years of learning, conflict, and love settle into a quiet joy. The center's impact rippled outward. Schools in Canada and Greenland adopted the calligraphy program, training teachers to blend scripts as Reza had done. Kala's textiles became a global brand, her designs worn by artists in Paris and poets in Tehran. Ayla's podcast grew, her stories reaching indigenous communities worldwide, inspiring them to preserve their own traditions. Nuna's healing workshops drew students from medical schools, bridging Inuit knowledge with modern science. Puti's book, illustrated by Reza, became a bestseller, its pages a love letter to the Arctic and its people. Reza's own art reached new heights. His ice sculptures, now exhibited in galleries from Inuit to Istanbul, were celebrated for their impermanence, a reminder that beauty, like life, is fleeting yet eternal in memory. He published a collection of poems, Ink on Ice, blending Persian and Inuit verses, with proceeds funding the center. The book won awards, but for Reza, its true value was in the letters he received from readers, Inuit youth, Persian artists, and strangers who found hope in its pages. The women, too, had changed. Ayla, once a storyteller for her village, now spoke to the world, her voice a bridge between cultures. Nuna, the healer, found her calling in teaching, her quiet strength a beacon for her students. Sila's laughter, once a shield against hardship, now carried the confidence of a mother and artist. Kala's textiles told stories of survival, her hands weaving a future for her daughter. Puti's songs, now recorded, carried the spirit of the North to every corner of the globe. Their children Kila, Nunik, Amir, Soraya, and Reza grew up with 2 languages, 2 scripts, and a world that felt both vast and intimate. As years passed, Reza's hair grayed, but his eyes remained bright. He built a life in the village, his small home a sanctuary of art and memories. The women, now grandmothers, remained his family, their bond unbroken by time. Tact 2, once his skeptic, became a friend, their evenings spent carving bone and sharing stories. The village, though changed, held fast to its roots, its igloos still glowing with poetry when winter returned. One winter night, under an aurora that pulsed like a heartbeat, Reza gathered with the women and their families by the bay. The children, now teenagers, recited poems they'd written, their voices blending Inuit and Persian in a harmony that felt like home. Reza carved a final verse into the snow, a line from his own heart. In the north, I found my ink. In your stories, I found my soul. The words, like the igloos, would melt, but their meaning would endure. The documentary crew returned one last time, capturing the center's growth and the community's spirit. The film, Legacy of Ice, premiered to global acclaim. Its final scene a portrait of Reza and the women, their faces lit by the aurora, their children at their sides. It ended with a shot of an igloo, its calligraphy glowing, a symbol of a journey that began with a stranger's dream and became a world's inspiration. Reza never left the Arctic. He grew old with the village, his hands still tracing letters, his heart still tied to the women who had made him whole. Their story is story lived on in the center, the art, the children, and the snow. It was a tale of love, of cultures meeting like rivers, of a man who came to write and stayed to belong. As the aurora danced, Reza looked at the faces around him and knew he was home.